I just found out my wife slept with her boss, a man I thought was my friend, then he stole over $200, $0 from us in a shady property deal. Now my lawyer says I might lose everything in this twisted betrayal. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how I found out my wife was cheating on me. The crazy part, it wasn't just some fling. No, it was with her boss, Tom, the guy I thought was my friend. The kind of betrayal that hits you like a punch in the gut and leaves you questioning everything. It all started a few months ago, but I didn't realize the full scope of it until recently. Looking back, there were signs, small things that I brushed off because I didn't want to believe the worst. But now, after everything I've uncovered, I see it clear as day. Was lying, manipulating, and sneaking around behind my back, and Tom was right in the middle of it. It all kicked off when I started noticing her phone acting weird. She'd be texting late at night, hiding her screen when I walked into the room. She'd get defensive if I asked her about it, saying she was just talking to her sister or her mother. But I know her too well. She's not that secretive, and she's never been one to hide her phone like it was a treasure chest. Then I caught her in a lie about a business trip she was supposedly taking to visit her sister, but she was actually in town, at a fancy hotel downtown with Tom. I knew something was off, but I didn't have concrete proof yet, so I kept quiet. One day, I decided to check her emails because I was sick of feeling like I was walking on eggshells. I found a string of messages between her and Tom, stuff that was way too intimate. They were talking about meeting up, about keeping things secret, and she kept calling him babe in some of the emails. My stomach dropped. I saw plans for a quick getaway, just the two of them, and I realized that this wasn't some innocent office flirtation. It was something much worse. I also found out that Tom had been funneling money into some shady property deal, over $200, $0, that had been involved with. That's when everything started to explode in my head. I didn't even sleep that night. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. How could she do this? How could she lie to me for months? I thought we were solid. I thought we had a future. But she was out there screwing her boss, my so-called friend, and stealing from us at the same time. It felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. The worst part, I wasn't just betrayed emotionally. I felt betrayed financially too. That money was supposed to be our safety net, our future, and now it's probably gone, all because of her lies. I felt so stupid for not seeing the signs earlier, for trusting her blindly. The next day I decided I had enough. I needed to confront her. I waited until she got home from work, heart pounding in my chest. When she walked in, she looked annoyed, like I was the one bothering her. I asked her straight up about the emails. Her face went pale for a second, then she started to lie. She told me it was all a misunderstanding, that Tom was just a friend, that the emails were innocent, that I was overthinking. She said I was paranoid, that I didn't trust her, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. But I knew better. I could see the guilt all over her face. She kept trying to spin her lies, but I wasn't buying it. I told her I knew everything, that I had proof. Her reaction was cold, dismissive, even bitchy. She snapped at me, said I was crazy, that I was ruining everything because I didn't want her to have a life outside of me. That moment was a turning point. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and confusion. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face, then turn around and accuse me of being the problem? I kept thinking about the money, about all the plans we had, about the trust I had given her. And now all of that was crumbling. I couldn't sleep after that. I stayed up all night trying to process what I'd learned, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. I felt so betrayed, so angry, and yet somehow also devastated. I never thought I'd be in a situation where the person I loved so much would turn out to be the biggest liar and cheat I'd ever known. But here I am, staring at the mess she made, wondering what the hell I do now. The days that followed were a blur of anger, sadness, and a kind of numb disbelief. I kept replaying everything in my head: her cold reaction, the lies, the emails, the money she'd stolen, and Tom, that supposed friend I had trusted for years. It was like the ground had shifted beneath my feet and I was just trying to stay upright. I couldn't believe how much I'd missed. All those signs that I'd ignored, all the little things that didn't add up but I chose to brush aside because I loved her. Now I saw them clearly. Her secretive behavior, the late nights, the constant excuses, the sudden interest in investments that I never fully understood. I started digging into her finances, trying to understand how deep this rabbit hole went. Turns out she'd been funneling money into that shady property deal with Tom for months. I found bank statements, wire transfers, receipts for deposits I never knew about. Over $200, $0 gone. All because she was chasing some quick money, some risky scheme with her boss and her so-called friend. I felt sick. That money was supposed to be our future, our house, our kids' college fund, our retirement. And now it was probably gone, stolen right from under us. I kept asking myself, how could she be so reckless, so selfish? It wasn't just the betrayal of her cheating, it was the betrayal of everything we'd built. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with more evidence. I set up a meeting with her at a neutral place, some downtown. I wanted her to see I wasn't just some guy who got played, I was serious. When she showed up, her face was annoyed, like she'd been caught in traffic or something trivial. I laid everything out. The emails, the bank statements, the wire transfers. Her reaction. She froze for a second, then started spinning her usual lies. She told me Tom was just a business acquaintance, that the emails were misunderstandings, that I was reading too much into it. She claimed she never meant for me to find out, that she was just trying to protect us from the stress of her affairs, which she insisted were just emotional. I couldn't believe how good she was at lying. She looked me dead in the eyes and told me she loved me, that this was just a mistake, that she'd never cheat on me if I just gave her a chance. But I knew better. I could see through her bullshit. Her voice was trembling when she said she loved me, but her eyes told a different story. They were cold, calculating. I felt like I was talking to a stranger, someone who was capable of lying straight to my face and stealing a fortune behind my back. I was furious, but I kept my composure. I told her I wanted her out of the house, that I needed space to think. She started crying, begging, trying to guilt-trip me into forgiving her. Said she was sorry, that she didn't mean for everything to go this far. But sorry doesn't fix the fact that she betrayed me, that she lied, that she stole from us. I told her I couldn't trust her anymore, that I'd be talking to a lawyer about the money, about everything. That night I felt the weight of it all crushing down on me. I was angry at her, yes, but I was also hurt, really hurt, because I loved her once. I thought we had something real. Now I was left with nothing but broken trust and a huge mess. I kept asking myself how I got here, how I let things go on so long without noticing. I felt like such an idiot trusting her blindly. The betrayal was so deep, I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. I kept thinking about the future she'd stolen from us, about the money she'd thrown away, about Tom, the so-called friend who turned out to be just another thief. It felt like my entire world was crashing down, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. After I kicked her out that night, I didn't sleep much. My mind was racing, thinking about everything I'd uncovered, everything I'd lost, and what I had to do next. That feeling of betrayal was like a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I kept going over the evidence, trying to piece everything together. The emails, the bank statements, the stolen money, it all pointed to one thing: had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. She played me for a fool, and she had no remorse. The worst part, I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. I felt like I'd lost not just my wife but also a friend I thought I knew. The next day, I contacted a lawyer. I needed to understand my legal options, especially with that money missing and her involvement in that shady property deal. It was clear had been hiding things from me, and now she was trying to deny everything. My lawyer, Mark, listened carefully as I laid out the details. He told me that with the evidence I had, I might have a case for financial fraud, and I could potentially recover some of the stolen money. But he also warned me that the situation was complicated. Involvement in the property deal was shady, and Tom's role was even more questionable. I had to be prepared for a long fight, and maybe even the possibility of losing everything if the court decided she was entitled to some of our assets. While I waited for legal advice, I started doing my own digging into Tom. I wanted to understand who he really was. Was he just a boss, Or was he someone I should be worried about? I found out he had a reputation in the real estate world for shady deals, and it seemed like he'd been involved in several questionable transactions before. That made me even more convinced that wasn't just cheating on me. She was involved in something much darker. The money she stole wasn't just for some affair. It was tied to a criminal scheme that could land her in serious trouble if it ever came out. That thought made me furious. She dragged me into her mess, and now I might lose everything because of her reckless greed. Meanwhile, I started to think about my own next steps. I couldn't stay in the house with her anymore. It was too painful, too full of memories of betrayal. I decided to rent a place nearby, just to get some space to breathe and think. I also started reaching out to friends and family, trying to find support. I didn't want to be alone with all these feelings. But I also didn't want to show anyone how broken I was. Deep down, I knew I had to be smart about this. Lies had almost destroyed me, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I was determined to fight for what was right, even if it meant tearing everything apart first. The emotional toll was worse than I expected. I felt angry at her, yes, but also betrayed and humiliated. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face, then try to act innocent? Every time I thought about Tom, I felt a mix of rage and disgust. He was supposed to be my friend, and now I found out he'd been stealing from us too. And my wife, she was the mastermind behind it all. It was like my own life had turned into some twisted crime drama. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind, so trusting. I had loved her, believed in us, and now I was left with nothing but a shattered heart and a mountain of debt. I knew I had to be careful moving forward. Might try to come back, or maybe she'd try to spin her lies even more. I couldn't let her manipulate me again. I had to stay focused, gather more evidence, and prepare for the battle ahead. I didn't want to lose everything: my house, my savings, my dignity. I was determined to fight for what was mine, even if it meant going through hell first. The betrayal cut so deep, but I knew I had to keep my head clear. I had to be smart, patient, and relentless if I wanted to come out of this with some semblance of justice. And deep down, I knew I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without a fight. The days turned into weeks, and the chaos in my head only intensified. I was trying to piece together everything: how managed to hide her lies for so long, how she convinced herself she could get away with stealing that much money, and how she thought she could just walk away from it all without consequences. Every time I thought about her, I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. The worst part was knowing she had been so manipulative, so good at hiding her true self behind a mask of the loving wife I thought I knew. Meanwhile, my lawyer, Mark, was working tirelessly. He advised me to start documenting everything: every email, every bank statement, every call. We needed to build a case, not just for the money she'd stolen, but also for her involvement with Tom and the shady property deal. Mark warned me that lies could get even more elaborate, and I had to be prepared for her to try and spin her story to save herself. Honestly, I didn't care what she said anymore. I just wanted justice, and more than that, I wanted to protect what little I had left. I also started doing some digging on my own. I contacted some friends in the real estate world, people who knew Tom and his reputation. Turns out, Tom had been involved in several questionable deals before. Some of them ended in lawsuits, some in bankruptcy, and others just quietly disappeared. That made me realize that wasn't just cheating on me. She was involved with a guy who had a long history of shady dealings. That realization hit me hard. I'd been so blind, trusting her and her friend, not seeing the danger lurking in the background. I felt betrayed all over again, knowing I'd been played for a fool. One night, I decided I needed to confront again, but this time with a clearer plan. I called her and told her I wanted to talk face to face, no more hiding. When she showed up, she looked nervous, like she knew I wasn't going to buy her latest lies. I laid everything out: proof of her involvement, the stolen money, Tom's shady reputation. Her reaction: she tried to deny everything, claiming she didn't know about the money being stolen, that I was making assumptions, that Tom was just a business associate. But I could see through her lies. Her eyes darted around, her voice trembled, and her facade cracked just enough for me to see the truth. She was panicked. I told her she needed to leave and not come back until she was ready to be honest. I didn't want her in my house anymore. I needed space to think and to figure out what I was going to do. She begged, of course. Started crying, saying she loved me, that she'd changed, that she was sorry. But sorry doesn't fix the fact that she'd lied, cheated, and stolen from us. I was done playing her game. I told her that I was filing for divorce, that I was going to pursue the legal route to get back what I could and hold her accountable for her actions. Her response: she called me heartless, said I was destroying our family, that I was overreacting. But I knew the truth. I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible, and I couldn't forgive her. That night I stayed up again, staring at the ceiling, feeling the crushing weight of everything I'd lost. My trust, my marriage, our savings, gone. I felt so empty. I kept thinking about how her lies had destroyed everything we built, how her greed had driven her to betray me and steal from us. I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust again, or if I'd just be forever by this experience. The pain was raw, but I also knew I had to be strong. I couldn't let her win. I had to fight for what was right, for my future, and for whatever dignity I had left. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined to see this through, no matter how ugly it got. I realized that the betrayal ran deeper than I thought. It wasn't just about the money or the affair. It was about her complete disregard for everything we once stood for. And even though I was hurting, I knew I had to start rebuilding piece by piece. That meant legal battles, sorting out the mess with Tom, and most importantly, figuring out how to move forward without her. I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without paying the price. The legal process dragged on longer than I expected. Mark kept telling me to be patient. It was going to take time to trace every dollar, to gather enough evidence to make a real case. Meanwhile, I was left dealing with the emotional fallout. Every day brought a new wave of anger, sadness, or just plain numbness. I'd be lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her lies and the betrayal over and over. The worst part was knowing she was out there, probably trying to spin her story to everyone around her, pretending she was the victim. But I knew the truth, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate her way out of it. One thing I did do was start rebuilding my confidence, small steps at first. I got rid of her stuff, changed the locks, and started sorting out the house. I also made a point of talking to some friends I trusted. They told me I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed, that I deserved better than someone who would lie and steal from me. That helped a little. Still, every time I saw her name or her face, I felt that sting of betrayal all over again. It was like a wound that refused to heal, no matter how much time passed. Meanwhile, Mark uncovered some shocking details about Tom. It turned out that Tom had been involved in multiple illegal property deals, some of which had ended in lawsuits and bankruptcy. His reputation was dirtier than I thought. I also found out that he'd been funneling money into these deals, probably with the hope of quick profits. But it was all a house of cards, shady deals, lies, and theft. It made me angrier knowing I'd been so blind. I'd trusted her, and she'd been involved in this criminal mess all along. That realization made me feel sick, like I'd been played for a fool, not just by her but by a whole network of lies. One day I got a call from Mark. He told me we had enough evidence to file a lawsuit for fraud and theft. We could also go after the property deal, trying to recover what was lost. The court date was set for a few weeks later. I was nervous but also relieved. Finally, I was taking action. I knew would fight back, probably with more lies or even blame shifting, but I was ready. I wanted her to face the consequences of what she'd done. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice, about making her accountable for the damage she'd caused. That period of waiting was brutal. I tried to stay busy, going to work, taking care of my kids, and trying to keep my mind off her. But the emotional scars lingered. I'd catch myself wondering if I could ever trust anyone again, if I'd be able to look at a woman the same way after all this. The betrayal had shattered my sense of security. I felt like I'd been sucker punched, left to pick up the pieces of a life I once thought was perfect. Still, I knew I had to stay strong for myself and for my kids. I wasn't going to let her ruin everything. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. I was nervous, but I also felt a strange sense of justice. Seeing all the evidence laid out, emails, bank statements, witness testimonies, it was clear had been lying from the start. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. I knew the outcome wasn't guaranteed, but I felt hopeful. Hopeful that maybe, just maybe, I could get some of that stolen money back, and that would be held accountable. As I sat there, I realized how much I'd grown through this ordeal, how I'd gone from a naive, trusting husband to someone who refused to be broken by betrayal. Whatever happened next, I was ready to face it. I had no choice but to move forward, even if the scars would stay with me forever. The court ruling was the culmination of months of chaos, and honestly, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness when it was over. The judge ordered to pay back a significant portion of the stolen money, most of it actually. The judge also recognized her involvement in the shady property deal and ordered her to relinquish her claim to some of the assets. It wasn't the perfect outcome. I knew she'd fight it, and I'd probably have to go through more legal wrangling. But for now, I felt like I'd finally taken a stand, like I'd fought for what was right, and I'd won, at least a little. The aftermath was a long, slow process of rebuilding. I moved into a new place, a quiet apartment where I could breathe. I focused on my work, on my kids, and on figuring out what life looked like after betrayal. I cut ties with completely. I didn't want her dragging me back into that mess. I also started seeing a counselor, not because I was weak, but because I needed help sorting through the emotional scars. Trust was shattered, and I knew I'd need time to heal. Still, I refused to let her define my future. Looking back, I realize how much this whole nightmare taught me. I learned that trust is fragile. And when it's broken, it's almost impossible to put back together the same way. I also learned that people can hide who they really are behind a veneer of normalcy, and that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most. But I also learned the importance of standing up for myself, of fighting back when I've been wronged, and of not letting betrayal destroy my sense of self. Most importantly, I've come to understand that money isn't everything. Yes, I lost a lot, and it hurts to think about all the plans that fell apart because of her greed and deception. But I've also realized that no amount of stolen cash can compare to the pain of losing trust in someone you loved. Moving forward, I want to rebuild my life on honesty and integrity, values I once took for granted but now see as essential. To anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation, I'll say this: trust your instincts. Don't ignore the small signs of betrayal, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right, even if it's messy and painful. The truth might hurt, but it's better than living in lies. And in the end, you'll come out stronger, even if it takes time to heal. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'm done with betrayal. I'm ready to start over, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that life goes on, better, stronger, and more aware.